5 years and 130 interviews have made Northeast Business Journal the place you go to for personal stories about people you know. They risk it all to start a business, and they just won't quit when things go bad. Welcome to Season 5 of the Northeast Business Journal. Have you ever seen a pink 18-wheeler dedicated to breast cancer research? It belongs to Jim and Debra Barrett, owners of Road Scholar Trucking in Dunmore. Not only do they own and run a highly successful trucking company, they take it one giant step forward by making roving billboards of their truck fleet.
Bill, my name's Jim Barrett. I, along with Deb, my wife, are founders, creators of Road Scholar Transport, which we began in 1988. And but the grace of God, we're still here for the grace of God.
That's a wonderful business name, Road Scholar. Deb, how did you two work in business together from the get-go?
Right.
How did you come up with that name?
Actually, Jim did. He was driving home from Philadelphia one day and called the house and said, I think I have the name. And how did you actually, how did it come to your mind?
The connotation of trucking or truckers is particularly a negative one. And I was trying to put a spin on, a positive spin on truckers, per se. And so from the get-go, we had an emphasis on trying to be best in class. Uniforms, grooming, stuff like that. A miniature wannabe UPS type. So the name set the high water mark for us. That's what we had to ascend to.
There's nothing like a Rhodes Scholar. So that was an inspiration, that name.
It was a goal.
What do you mean, Jim, when you say that the reputation of truckers was not particularly good?
Well, decades ago, truck drivers were knights of the road, looked upon, coming on an accident scene or helping people out, stranded motors. Over the years, unfortunately, it degenerated, and we were trying to reestablish some positive credentials about the guys and gals that I work with, making them feel good about themselves. And for the most part, I think that's worked.
We're for all you folks watching, we're videotaping this, the first interview of our Northeastern Pennsylvania Business Journal, Series 5, 5th year, and we've learned, Jim and Deb, to kind of seek out people who have great stories, and you two do. Although, Jim, I'm not sure you believe it, but you are a wonderful story. You are a bootstrap operation. Started with nothing.
Less than nothing.
Less than negative, I think you said before.
The bank came to our house to appraise the house, and we needed to borrow $10,000. And they were actually tape measuring the living room and the bedrooms for dimensions. And Deb's out there crying. Said, oh my God, this is not going to work. So,
my goodness. So that's how it all began.
It all began.
Yeah, but we've been around trucks all our life. Deb's father and family was all truckers. They were part of that Fowler and Williams Destiny, Dynasty. And I cut my teeth there and just felt I had to go out and try something on my own.
So you started washing trucks at age 16.
How about driving at 14?
Oh, careful, the police are right in the hallway.
No.
So you started driving trucks at 14, washing trucks around 16, yet you put yourself through college.
Yes, sir.
Why, how, what inspired you to go to college?
You know what, Bill, it was the thing to do. It wasn't an preordained endpoint or mission. I went to Scranton Prep. Fortunately got through there with a great sense of accountability. Prep taught you that. You had to deliver on yourself. And then going to university, and it's 4 more years with the Jesuits, you learn to be an independent producer. Right?
Now, prep is expensive to go to.
My mother and father scraped.
So you're not from money, so to speak.
If I wanted to use the car when I was 16, I had to go to the laundromat to do the laundry on Saturday afternoon.
So you had that work ethic right from the beginning.
Well, I think so. Yeah, I'm proud of that.
I bet you are.
I don't have an alarm clock. I have to get up at 3 a.m. I'll get up at 2:55. Right? So.
What are you most proud of, Jim, Road Scholar Transport, as you sit here right now? How many years? You started in 1988.
88.
25 years about.
Darn near. Most proud of the people that you meet, people you work with, right? Tolerating my shortcomings, and there's a bunch of them. And it's not always easy. You know, the trucks on the road just don't happen to get there. It's a challenge. There are some real perils. As I referenced to you before, we had to bury two of our friends, our people. That is not fun.
Drivers?
One driver and one maintenance facilitator. And clearly the low points when you have to stand up there and speak to the people at the funerals. This
was shortly after you began, as I understand it, right? You had a bad accident? Is that what you're referring to here?
No, we had an accident a year ago May. I started it as the first driver in September of 1988.
You were the only driver of a leased truck.
Yes,
you even own it.
Yes, sir. But we hired a gentleman by the name of David Barrett. David worked with the date of his application was November '88. A year ago, this past May 23rd, he was killed in an accident that never should have happened out on Interstate 80 in Du Bois, Pennsylvania. David's record was impeccable. 8 kids. He had no fault. It was totally not a result of his driving. It was the dare I say it, I'm going to call him out, the imbecile that was in the truck in front of him.
The other truck?
Yes.
So it was 2 tractor trailers?
The guy actually abandoned his truck that broke down in a lane of travel. He abandoned it. So going up to Dorothy's house and having to meet the family was terrible. And then back in the late 90s, we lost a man down in Virginia. So, a good friend of us, Tom Drasba. So there are things that say, why are you in this damn business?
I find it really interesting, Jim and Deb, that and says a lot about you, that we're here to talk about your business, the lessons you've learned in your life, and all of these things. And the first part of the conversation that you bring to the table is the pain and the hurt of losing people who've been part of that business family.
It's indelible. You don't shed that. And if you ask me what keeps me awake at night, people getting hurt. These are 80,000-pound trucks.
Yeah.
You know, they're 60-mile-an-hour missiles.
Wow. So, boy, that's an expression.
Well, it is what it is. So, you know, now we have to manage these things, these components, you know, daily, and you have to do it well. You know, here's a record for you. We've been in business almost 24 years, and unfortunately, we've had some accidents. This company has never been cited for a defective piece of equipment that was involved in an accident.
Okay.
That is an impeccable record.
Okay. Let's explore this just a little bit. It's fascinating, but we have to do a little set the scene of Jim and Deb from Road Scholar Transport. You two started it together. Well, let's even go back before that. You meet at a church dance in Clark Summit, correct?
Correct.
You want to tell me what year, or would you rather not?
Jeez,
I don't remember.
I don't know. I was 16, I don't know. I'm not sure.
You were 16 at the time. So you've been married all these years. You finish University of Scranton, I think it was.
Right.
1973.
Okay, 73. And you've had trucks in your blood from the get-go because of your family.
Right.
And you set out and you create a company. Bootstrap, negative money, have to put up your home to get it. And
4 children.
Four children now. How many then?
The 4 children.
4.
You had 4 children then.
Right, when we started.
Okay.
The youngest was 5. Right?
So you decide to start a company. This program series has always been about that decision. And there have been people, not unlike yourself at all, who started with nothing, who took huge risks, put everything they had on the line to get it started.
Right.
Were you absolutely convinced you could make it?
Absolutely
I was.
not.
Oh, I was.
Absolutely not.
I'm hearing a difference of opinion.
I absolutely was.
No, this past winter, we did not have a winter. I think we had 3 or 5 inches of snow in the Northeast.
Right.
Thank God, in 1988, I think we had a total of 9 inches of snow. If I had to get towed out of one ditch, if I had one accident, if I damaged one piece of equipment, which was one of one, I was out of business. So actually, the
I
weather,
knew he could do it.
the weather
And yet,
played
Deb,
a big
you
role.
were so sure it was going to make it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I worked inside and I took care of accounts payable, accounts
You were
receivable,
the
and dispatching.
bookkeeper.
I said, I will stay inside and I will do everything I can in here. You go out, you drive the truck, you talk to the people, and we'll be
You're the
fine.
bookkeeper, you're the truck driver of the only truck.
Right.
And it's a leased truck, you can't buy one.
Well, I had arranged to lease a truck early on, and at the last moment, the provider, it's a national company, said I didn't have enough of creditability.
Sure.
They said nixay. So the day before I was supposed to go start making a pickup. So I had to go out and I rented a 30-year-old U-model Mac
Right.
with a cable clutch on it.
I
Matter
remember
of fact,
that.
I remember breaking down on the road going into the industrial park in Pittston. Have a cobble together the clutch.
It sounds, Jim, like you were the wreck of the business emotionally, and your wife was the rock.
Well, she
I think
was and
so.
still is. But when you're driving a truck, your mind's not on anything.
No.
You're just executing.
Yeah,
So-
true.
So I was able to escape the
I want so much to talk about your awareness campaign. It is the most remarkable story, but let's not get too fast. Let's not move too quickly. When did you get to buy your first truck? What happened that made that possible?
we made money.
Yeah, things were going well.
We-
Of course.
I was a truck driver. We virtually had no overhead. So
Right.
you did the
We worked
you know,
right out of the house.
the business one-on-one
That's
thing.
right.
Work out of your garage.
Yeah.
Work out of your bedroom. All right? So absent the overhead, we were able to come in there at competitive prices per se, and get the job done, and we were able to make some money and thus go buy a used truck.
You bought it. Your first truck was a used truck.
We still have it.
How many trucks?
Yeah.
Okay, so we start with a leased truck, no revenue, working out of your garage or whatever.
Bedroom.
How many trucks today?
Just north of 100,
100 trucks which you own?
in conjunction with the bank.
Of course.
Right.
Trailers? How many trailers?
Just about 300.
300, yeah.
How in the world do you build a business from a single truck, needing customers, looking for customers, to what you are today? What's the short answer to that question?
Jim is very good. He's very good.
No, the guys
are.
and gals in the trucks.
You always credit somebody
Well,
else.
you're selling their work. Right? You're going to the customers.
You have to go out
and
and get the freight.
and-
You have to have the freight to fill the trucks. So you're
Of
very
course you
good
do.
at that.
How does he go about getting the freight to fill the trucks?
He loves people. He does. He goes out and he meets people, and people gravitate towards him. They
if
like
we
him.
give
They
our word-
trust him.
If we give our word, it's going to get done. Mm-hmm. Okay, absolutely going to get done.
You knew that right from the get-go. If I remember
Yeah.
reading about the mission, the purpose, the driving principles behind your company, from the beginning it was that promise.
It was,
Right.
if I said to the customer, I can get it done, I can drive the truck. They said,
right.
what's your biggest attribute? I can get the job done. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a lot of work. I mean, no secret. Deb would help me load trucks. And the kids
Right.
help you load trucks.
Bookkeeper
unload
and
them,
truck loader.
Yeah. Dispatcher, payroll. Yeah.
Sweep trailers out. Total emphasis on cleanliness. Hygiene. Yeah. But that's by being it's easy to do things when you can control them. All right. So and if you're committed to yourself and you're going to commit to your people you work with and your customers, the rest falls in place. Honest to goodness.
What was the experience for your kids, if you can identify it, of going through this very stressful, risky, he says risky, you say not risky at all, but what was how old were your kids, your 4 kids, when you made
the
this decision?
youngest was 5, so 5, 6, 8, and 12.
Did they sense, Deb, any sacrifice at all?
Oh, they helped. Oh, no, they helped. I would have them putting freight bills in order, filling out the ledger. Yeah, they helped.
Became a family enterprise.
Yes, they're all with us today, actually. They all work with us.
All of the kids are in the business?
Yes. Uh-huh.
That must make you extraordinarily happy.
It
From
does
time to
me.
time. Separation of church and state.
Of course, sure.
Yeah, it's got its ups and downs.
No, but each one,
Yeah, they do.
They bring contribution.
Yeah.
There's no sandbagging. Zero. They're absolutely not. You're a two-legged contributor.
All right, let's talk about the remarkable story of your awareness campaign. You haven't come up with a great name for the awareness campaign yet. Road Scholar is brilliant. The awareness campaign is vast, incredibly,
Great idea.
incredibly impressive. Give me the elevator definition of your awareness campaign. What is it?
Bringing hope and awareness to people that are maybe less fortunate.
Okay, bringing
or
hope and
afflicted.
awareness to people who are less fortunate.
Or
You
afflicted.
do it through making your truck trailers billboards.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Just yesterday, I sat with a young man that has a pancreatic cancer. He's a 2-year survivor, and he came over and he said that, he had seen our pancreatic cancer trailer at an event that we were helping with a girl locally by the name of Taryn Jones. I mean, she's just a firecracker. Her father passed away from pancreatic cancer, and nonetheless, J.J. Saunders was saying that he thought that element of support throughout the communities was very helpful to him. You should hear his story. So if you can help people and give back a bit, it's big. And it was all serendipity. There was no master plan, no grand design.
It happened quite by accident, I think.
Yeah. Devin, Kelly, Mary Beth, Bridget were all going to a breast cancer walk.
Who are these people?
Our daughters.
You and your
We
daughter?
would walk every year in the Race for the Cure in Scranton.
Okay.
For about 8 years, 10 years, and every year I would, come on, why don't you come down and walk with us? And he, no, I'm going to work Saturday morning. Okay, I'm going to work. So finally, I was really, come on, Jim, really, you should just take a little time out. This is really important. And he said, well, I'm not going to do that, but I'll do something else. And he came up with the idea of
I
the
got
trailer.
chastised for being chauvinistic, that I wasn't
No,
caring.
no, that's not true.
But Saturday is a very precious day. The phones aren't ringing, and you can reset your work week. That's been a habit forever for me. But I thought, well, listen, with all due no deference to anybody can put a pink band around their wrist, all right? Or wear a pink shirt one day a year. We went out and got a brand new trailer. I said, I need it pink. We put an 8-foot pink ribbon on either side of it.
Oh my.
And just rolled it out.
And that was the start of it.
And then one of our drivers took ill with prostate cancer, Greg Kirsch. He passed away, all but for the lack of a PSA test, okay?
Right.
Great guy. Greg was fantastic, and he never should have passed. So we created bookends, all right, to try to stimulate guys getting blood tests, PSAs. Then I ran into a very dear friend of mine who's good friends with Bob and Suzanne Wright from NBC.
Sure. Right.
Their grandson, Bob, started Autism Speaks, and they had seen what we had done for breast cancer and prostate cancer. And
They had seen it on the road?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And a good friend of mine knows him personally very well, and we ended up, they asked us, would we consider doing something for Autism Speaks? Why not?
They called you because they had seen the other trailer?
Yes, sir. Well, a friend of mine, they had seen it. Our friend lives near them, and the conversations just grew up. Would you think about doing something for Autism Speaks? So it was natural. Yeah, let's do that. And what was really good about that is I learned, whenever you see somebody with a disability, maybe you become a bit standoffish. That's the problem with it. You have to be engaging. So the deal for the Autism Speak allowed me to mature as an individual, right? To be more sensitive to people that have these afflictions.
Embrace these people.
Then we ran into Liz Scott down in Philadelphia. Her daughter, Alexandria, Alex's Lemonade Stand, she passed away from pediatric cancer. But before she passed, she started selling lemonade in her front yard. And before she passed, I think she raised either $2 or $4 million for a children's hospital in Philadelphia. And Liz sent me a note, and this was paralyzing. She sent me a note. She says, well, before Alex passed, right, she wanted to see the United States. But now she'll be able to see it from the side of your truck. And I'll tell you, that was paralyzing to read that.
Yeah.
But it's just so, and then it's a conflagration. I mean, right now I think we're up to 25 or 26 different foundations. We did one for Marley's Mission, and that deal about Cody.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Why
Terrible.
don't you share that with my audience? You now have a trailer for Marley's Mission.
Yes, sir.
Please explain for my audience who may not know that story.
I hooked up with Gene Tallarico, Andy Jabola's ADA, and Gene was on the board of this Marley's Mission.
Which is?
Marley's Mission is a horses healing people, I believe. Equine assisted therapy. This girl, Cody, God bless her, I think it was on the 4th of July about 3 years ago. She was brutally raped, savaged in her own bedroom, I believe the story goes, the facts go. And she became, I guess I'm going to say, catatonic, and I hope I'm not representing that inaccurately. But the only thing she could relate to was Marley, her hamster. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so they tried all sorts of assistance to try to get her back into a child state, having fun.
Of course.
Not being catatonic or introverted. But as it were, somebody said, let's try equine assisted therapy. And it worked remarkably. I mean, if you met this girl, Cody, she doesn't have a problem in the world.
Okay, I guess the point of this for my audience is you not only, Deb, I want to include you in all of this, forgive me. On the other hand, you told me he was the talker.
That's right.
That you not only run a trucking company, own and run a trucking company, you not only care about your customers enormously, you not only make sure that the promise you make that freight will perform exactly the way it would be delivered the way you want it to. But you create this idea between the two of you.
And our daughter Bridget actually designed the trailer.
For Marley's.
Mm-hmm.
It just gets more and more interesting. But you know the causes. You know what's behind them. You know the bottom story of it all.
There is a downside to this, okay? Because to a person, you get to meet those that are afflicted. Okay, when we met Francesca Scarano, who has Rett syndrome,
mm-hmm.
and she can't talk. She's sometimes immobile. She's got a pick. You take it personally. I met this one kid, Jeremy Dale. He was born with terrible facial deformities, and I met him. We did this trailer for Children's Cranial Facial Foundation, and we did it over the computer with his father, George, and they'd never seen it. We never met. We met up on the interstate one Saturday. I drove the truck up and I showed it to them. I met Jeremy. He's bouncing around like a rock star. I'm crying. Okay, he didn't have a problem, but he doesn't. In his face, he doesn't have a left eye. He has an orbit down around here, and his ears not symmetrical with the other ear. So you see these afflictions, and sometimes it hurts. Our own son, our grandson, Braden, right now is in Moses Taylor. He has a condition called neurofibromatosis, mm-hmm. and we ended up hooking up with Children's Tumor Foundation to create a road exhibit for the Children's Tumor Foundation.
Right.
And they rolled that out at the New Jersey State Fair 3 years ago, mm-hmm. At Giant Stadium, and there was like 500,000 people they got to see firsthand at the entrance gate this affliction called neurofibromatosis. We actually took photos of that. I was going to he goes to Hopkins a bunch, okay?
Yeah,
I was going to personally drive the trailer down there and try to show them what we're doing to try to get some favoritism for
All right,
Braden.
let's explain to the audience how this happens. I think I read on your by the way, folks, go to Facebook and put in Road Scholar Transport. It's a remarkable story, and Jim has only touched on, you said 25 trailers that serve this purpose?
25 different foundations.
Different foundations.
Mm-hmm.
And how many trailers are so painted? And
about 30.
About 30. And your clients have a relationship to these. I think it says something about your client companies participate in funding getting these trailers prepared.
No, sir.
No, not true.
No, it's a self-contained cost.
What do you mean by self-contained?
Road Scholar Transport.
You cover it all.
Yeah, I didn't want to have any type of somebody pointing a finger on anything. So
it's entirely your.
Some of the customers are on the sides of the trucks.
They'll jointly help us. I mean,
right.
Those, but they load the truck de facto They're pushing
Right.
the campaign, not us.
I
We can't run
see.
down the road with empty trucks.
But your company
But-
pays for
Right.
all of this
Yes, sir.
That's
hard
right.
work and so on.
Right.
Yes.
Remarkably mission driven. Does that come from gratitude for the good things in life?
Appreciation. Sure. It turned out, it started as a bit of a jousting between Deb and myself. But now, you know, it's, dare I say it, it's rewarding. It's rewarding if you can help somebody, sure.
Deb, it's time for you to speak up.
I don't think so.
What are we missing? We're running out of time. What are we missing in the story of Jim and Deb Barrett and Rhodes Scholar Transport? What am I not getting across that you have a minute to share with my audience?
You know, I can't think of anything,
Can I-
really. Go ahead.
We've gone we've gone significantly into technology in conjunction with trucking. Okay, we're able now to give our customers full 100% transparency on their inventories once it leaves their property. Okay, and the story behind that, it's too long to talk about.
I know it
but
is.
we can give a person 100% transparency on where exactly their goods are and where they were. Not many people can do that. We're beta testing right now an internal locking device that we can lock a trailer from our ops center remotely 200 miles away and control the lock and unlock of it. So,
Aluminum trailer floors, something about that.
right.
And that's for sanitary purposes?
Sure. I mean, you think about cosmetics, food products, pharmaceutical products. You want to make sure that you present to the customer a product that's able to be sanitized.
Rather than the wooden floors.
Yeah, a conventional wooden floor, it's a sponge. It absorbs whatever you
Right.
was on it yesterday.
So you're not only buying trucks and trailers, you're kind of leading the industry, as I understand it,
I think
from a
that's
third
correct.
party who shall remain unnamed.
Oh, I know.
People who think very, very highly of you. It's been a wonderful interview, and I thank you on behalf of so many people for the wonderful things you're doing to make life better, for caring as much as you obviously do. Deb, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Jim, it didn't turn out too badly, did it?
No, thank you.
You're about to meet a very unusual man. Never would we have thought that the Northeast Business Journal would interview a psychiatrist. But the son of Dr. Guido Boriosi thought you should meet his dad. He's the 79-year-old son of an Italian immigrant coal miner, and he still works 14-hour days.
I'm Guido Boriosi. I'm a psychiatrist from Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Oh, I hope we can do justice to your story. May I call you Guido?
Yes, you can. I wish you would.
Remarkable story. As we sit here in late June of 2012 doing this interview, this will probably run, let's say, after January 2013, and you will be 51?
More like 80.
It was a compliment.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Yeah, well, you're going to be 80 this January
January
2013.
30th, yes.
Remarkable. And you've been retired for a few years?
Never. Never.
I'm playing with you.
I've worked since I was in elementary school. And I've always worked. And most of the time I've had several jobs. I'm a workaholic. As a matter of fact, I'm 79 and a half. I now work 14-hour days.
I know. Like I say, I hope we do justice to you in this interview. Remarkable story. If you love stories of self-made people, started with nothing. Parents had no money.
No money.
Yeah.
My parents came from Italy. My mother came over when she was 3. My father came over when he was 20.
And Gubbio was home.
Yeah, Gubbio was
To
home,
them.
yes.
Yeah.
And my dad came over here with no family.
Your dad worked in the coal mines.
Yes, my dad was a stonemason by trade. When he got over here, the unions wanted something like $2,000 to get in, and he couldn't have got $2,000 together if he worked for 4 years. So he bought a farm in Nicholson, and he ran a farm for several years. My 2 sisters were born there. My sisters are 10 and 9 years older than I am. They were.
Are they both living?
No, they're both deceased now.
Okay.
But shortly after running the farm, he lost the farm during the Depression. And then he moved down to Dunmore, where I was born. And I was in Dunmore for maybe 3 years, and then we moved to Old Forge, where I spent the rest of my life.
In Old Forge. So what are your early memories of school in Old Forge?
Well, I knew that we had to walk to school every day, and it was more than a mile. And you went home for lunch and still came back. I also remember that my dad's instructions to me when I was going to school the first day, he said to me, He says, you're going to school. He says, I don't want you to get into any kind of trouble, because if you get into trouble, that's not the trouble. He says, when I find out about it, that's the trouble. He also says, I don't want you to come home and telling me that the teacher picked on you by mistake. He says, if you were close enough for a mistake, it's your fault. So those are my instructions.
Did your dad finish high school?
No, my dad went for the 4th grade in Italy.
My goodness.
Yeah. My father was also a genius, by the way, because, he had artistic abilities. My dad did a sculpt. I have a bust in my office that he did. He had never sculpted in his life. There was a bust over the Lafayette College Library of a Greek goddess, and he saw the picture and he says, what did they take a picture of that for? I says, that's called sculpting. He said, I could do that. So if you do it, do it. So he poured a block of cement, let it harden, made his own tools, and he chipped it out. I have it in my office now.
So you're very proud of your memory of your dad. What role did your mom have in your life?
Well, my mom was a hard worker and a true housewife. I mean, we were too poor to go out to eat, so cooked meals were every day. And I have a fascinating story, because when I was in elementary school, I'd come home sometime and say, Dad, I'd like to have a bologna sandwich like the other kids. And he'd say, shut up and eat your prosciutto, we can't afford bologna. little did I know I was being raised on a delicacy, because we used to make our own.
Yes, of course.
Sure.
You knew in 7th grade,
Yes.
Dr. Boriosi, Guido's your first name.
Yes.
You knew in 7th grade you wanted to be a psychiatrist?
Absolutely.
And you told your parents, and they didn't even know what that meant.
Nothing, no. They were wondering what the heck I was talking about,
How did you know in 7th grade?
Well, in 7th grade, it was probably 1945, and I went to see a movie, which was rare because we didn't have money. But it was one of the movies I went to see, and it was World War II, so it was a war picture. And in that war picture, they had a scene where a huge black American soldier had a psychotic episode, and he became robot-like. And then the psychiatrist worked with him, and at the end of the movie, he's back being this big, powerful, wonderful guy. And I mean, I got turned on. I said, that's it. That's what I want to do. And that was it. That was the only thing in my mind for the rest of my life.
You knew it and you stuck with it.
Yes, with a lot of detours.
Right. But you were a gifted student in school. You excelled academically.
Well, I don't know if I excelled. I did okay.
Well, you got in medical school, so you must have done pretty well.
Well, I wasn't a hard worker in school.
You weren't?
No.
But you got decent grades.
Well, I knew how to take tests. I always tell everyone thought I was smarter than what I was, because I knew how to take an exam. I was always...
You want to explain that to my audience? Sure. How do you know how to take an exam when you're not smart?
Well, the thing is in an exam, I have anxiety until you hand me the exam, and then it's, for some reason in my body, I go into a different mode. I just relax. I just calm right down, and I do very well, so that I'm always thinking clearly. And then the other thing is, if it's an objective test, multiple choice, I have an ability to cut it down, not to 1 out of 5. I'm always guessing 1 out of 2, 1 out of 3, because I can eliminate certain ones. And so I just know how to take an exam.
I call that gifted student. Maybe you don't, but you're the psychologist, psychiatrist, so I guess you know whether you're gifted or not.
Well, I have a gift of having a slightly above average intelligence, but I'm saying it's a matter of being able to use it.
Let's stay with the story. You graduate from high school in Old Forge. You know what year?
1950.
1950. In 1950, it's not expected that you will go to college. In this area particularly, most people in that era did not get to go to college. So you get a scholarship.
Yes, it was a partial scholarship to Lafayette College. In those days, they would take some of their better students, and you would take exams from the various schools. Like the Navy would send someone to give exams in the various schools that Lafayette did. And I scored high enough to not get the first prize, but I was offered a partial scholarship there.
Define the partial scholarship for us.
Well, they paid something like 70% of my schooling.
Including room and board?
Well, it was just
in general?
In general, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Even having 70% provided was not enough.
No, but I had parents who, my father and mother were very, very much on education. In Old Forge, I came from a street where we were all first-generation Italians. Our parents all came from Italy. They were all coal miners. And in 50, physicians were the esteemed profession.
Of course.
So then if your kid's going to do anything, he's going to be a doctor. So we had, as a matter of fact, at one time, our high school teacher had done a study and said there were more MDs coming out of Old Forge per capita than almost anywhere in the United States.
do you suspect, if that was true, that it was ethnic? The expectation was basically the drive of the ethnic?
I think it was, you know, in Old Forge, Old Forge was divided into every ethnic group that you can think of.
Of course.
But they were all hardworking people.
Yes.
And low-income type people. So I think everybody was pushing for their kids to.
So where did the other 30% of the cost of going to college come from?
Well, my mom worked making pizza in Old Forge and Ghigerelli's. It was one of the number one. And as a matter of fact, Mrs. Ghigerelli at that time thought there was no money in pizza. So if you went there to eat, and it was popular, you'd sit down, you'd wait for an hour to get in, you'd sit down, and they would give you one piece of pizza per person. And if you finished that and you waited till everybody else was served, you may get a second piece. But she thought there was no money in pizza. The money was in the drinks.
Old Forge is built on pizza.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. As a matter of fact, most of the recipes in Old Forge are my mother's recipes from Ghigerelli's.
Is that right?
Sure.
All right, so we're back to how you come up with the other 30% of your tuition and costs to go to Lafayette College. Your parents have no money.
Yes. My dad was working in the coal mines. The coal mines were working like one day every couple of weeks, you know, and there were no supplemental income, so you got paid for the day you worked. And then we lived off of our garden. We had chickens, you know, we had rabbits. We had
raised
pigeons.
them?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
You know, and we didn't go out to eat, you know, we ate home. Mom cooked.
Okay. You were telling me the story of your father coming up with a $50 bill, and he gives it to you at the start of your college education and says, "This is for emergencies only,
That's
son."
right. And I returned it to them after the 4th year.
You didn't use any of it, gave it back to Dad at the end of the 4th year.
Thank God.
So how did you put yourself through school?
Well, I used to work in the cafeteria at school, you know, and that's it. I mean, cafeteria, they're very frugal. We didn't spend money. We just didn't have it.
Where did you learn that ethic from your parents? You didn't have it, but...
Well, in elementary school, I was working, we had a bakery that, across the street from me. It was a Liberty Baking Company. They made bread and pizza. And I can still remember, as an elementary school, sweeping the bakery for 50 cents on Sundays. You know, and then after that, I got a job wrapping sliced bread. They even made a little stool for me to stand on so I could reach up, because the bread would come down automatic slicer, and then I'd have to put it into a contraption where the wax paper would be folded on over, and I have to slide it through a heating bag.
All right, so you graduate from Lafayette. You're pre-med.
Pre-med.
You decided to be pre-med from the beginning?
Yes, sure, psychiatry.
You were set to do that.
That's it.
You graduate pre-med, qualified academically and so on, but you have to go into a 7-year hiatus of some kind? Why?
Yes. Well, at Lafayette, the pre-medical advisor was the head of the biology department, you know, and he had say. He had total say over who went, who didn't go, and there was some prejudice at that time. And I mean, he was a fine teacher and a doctor, but at one of the meetings, he happened to make a statement like, "There are too many Italians in medicine; they're taking over." And with a name like Guido Boriosi, I felt like I was in trouble. You know?
How did you come to that conclusion?
As it turned out, I was right, you know, because there were only 2 of us.
You weren't chosen to go on.
No. No. As a matter of fact, and the way that came about is my family had friends that were one of the sons of my father's friend was a prof down at Jefferson, so we contacted him.
Jefferson Medical School,
yes,
Philadelphia.
Contacted him to find out what was happening with my application. And he's the one who informed us that the application was on hold, you know, by the doctor from pre-medical advisor. So it was on hold until all the positions were filled.
So you got a phone call one day 7 years later saying there's an opening for you?
Well, no. What happened is I went through a whole bunch of things through those 7 years, and then I decided to go back again. That gentleman had resigned from his job, and the person who took his position had known what happened to me 7 years before, so he helped me.
He made it right.
Yes.
Okay. During those 7 years, I think it says in my notes, you got in those days, lucrative position working where? Well,
with the state health department. My first, when I couldn't get into medical school, late in the year, I applied for fellowships, whatever was open.
Sure.
And I got a fellowship to St. Louis University, and it was fortunate because it was with the Nobel Prize winner, Dr. E.A. Doisy, who found the vitamin K. So I was going to go for a doctorate degree in biochemistry. And so when I got to St. Louis and I'm working in his laboratory, I was only there about a couple of weeks, and I'm watching what the PhDs did. And they were in that laboratory on cots for nights after night with their rats, collecting feces and blood, and I just knew that this wasn't for me. So I get on the phone and I call my poor mom in Old Forge and I tell her, I says, Mom, I says, I'm going to finish the semester. I says, but after the semester, I'm coming home. I said, this is not for me.
Was that first time away from home?
Yes.
Old Forge your whole life?
Yes.
St. Louis?
St. Louis, yes.
So you stick it out for a semester.
Right. And I remember telling her, and she says, well, if you come home, what are you going to do? And I came up with my first big wisdom thoughts. I said to her, in life, there's times when you don't know what to do. It's enough to know what you're not going to do. So I know I'm not going to do this. So I came home. So when I came home, she says, I had to get a job. There were no jobs in 1950, 51. So I maneuvered with the politicians in Old Forge to get a job on the garbage truck in Old Forge.
Oh, my.
Yes. So I worked on the garbage truck. And I can't remember specifically how much, but it was something like $4.50 a day I got paid. And I was out in the weather, and I did that for about at least a year.
Pitching garbage
Yes,
for a year.
Yes, absolutely. And then we didn't have a garbage truck. We had just a dump truck, so you have to throw it up.
Oh, my.
Yes. So I did that for about a year. As a matter of fact, I used to go to work whistling every day. I'd whistle when I went to work. I'm not a negative guy. I'm a positive guy.
You whistled your way to work on the
Yes,
garbage
absolutely.
truck.
And my mom said, she says, Guido, she says, I don't understand. She says, you want to be a doctor. You
Yeah.
finish college. You're working on a garbage truck for $4.50 a day, she says, and you're whistling. I said, I'm whistling for 2 reasons, Mom. She said, what's that, son? I said, I'm whistling because I have a job. $4.50 a day beats nothing. I says, and I hate that job so much, Mom. I know I'm not doing that the rest of my life. And then she says to me, well, how long are you going to do it, Guido? I said, I'm going to do it until I find a job that's that much better, Mom, and I'll take it. So I get that, I'm going to look for a job a little bit better, I'll take it. I'm going to keep doing it till they let me go to medical school, and I'll be a doctor.
Never lost sight of the medical thing.
Never.
All right, 7 years, you're out. What happens to get you back in? It says in my notes, you gave up. You took a lot of risk. You gave up a very, at that time,
A good job.
a good job.
Yes, because after the garbage truck, I got a job at that same bakery. I delivered bread. As a matter of fact, even here in Old Boston, this was part of my route. I started in Old Forge. I did Duryea. I came to Old Boston. I went to Plains. The main part of my route was in Nanticoke, and I finished in Glenline.
Okay, we're running out of time. You got to stay with me here.
Sure.
What was the good job you gave up to go to medical school?
Well, one of my last jobs, I got drafted in the Army for 2 years as a private in the infantry. When I came out, I had to get a job, and I'm looking for a job, and in the paper there was a job working for the state health department as an industrial hygienist. So I took that job. And when I took that job, being single, anytime they sent a flyer saying, if you want more education, would you volunteer? So I volunteered. I was the only person from Pennsylvania sent down to Oak Ridge, Tennessee to study radiation protection. So while I'm down there, as God would have it, the head of radiation protection for the state health department resigned his job to take a job at Westinghouse in Pittsburgh, and they sent me a telegram telling me when I'm finished down there, I'm going to be transferred to Harrisburg and become the acting chief of radiation protection. So I moved down when I come back. My first job was to rewrite the regulation. It was 433 for radiation protection.
All right. So let's skip ahead.
Sure.
What happens that opens Jefferson Medical School for you?
Well, what happens is one of the people that was reporting to me was an older guy who got accepted to medical school, and he says, you always want medical school. He says, you should apply. He says, they're accepting me. He says, and I still have to go back for some credits. Oh, I got to try this. So I applied to Jefferson, Temple, and Hahnemann in Philadelphia. And my first interview was at Temple. And when I went to Temple University for an interview, when you finished down at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, they gave you a little diploma. It was called DRIP, Dabble in Radiation Protection. So he had a DRIP diploma on his wall, and I said, oh, you have a DRIP diploma. So that bonded us, and I knew I was in.
All right, so where did you find the money to go to medical school? Had you saved your money?
I saved a few dollars, a few dollars, not much. But then once I got into medical school, I borrowed my way through school. I used to tell everyone, if I talk to someone for more than 15 minutes, I'm borrowing money. As a matter of fact, when I was in medical school, I got married, and when you first come back into practice, everybody you borrowed from sends you a letter. And my poor wife would say, my God, Guido, how much money did you borrow? She says, everything. I said, if I talk to somebody more than 15 minutes, I'm borrowing money.
And you got to borrow a lot of money then.
Got to borrow money.
If I might ask, of course, today it's hundreds of thousands of dollars when kids come out of medical school and start. In those days, what did you come out with the debt?
have been something more like $25,000.
It's a huge amount of money in
Yes.
those days.
Oh, sure it was.
All right, so you get your medical degree, and then do you immediately go on to psychiatry?
Yes, after the medical degree, I do a year of internship at Harrisburg Polyclinic Hospital, and then I go for my residency at Warren State Hospital. in Warren,
Never,
Pennsylvania.
ever lost sight of
Never.
that end goal.
Ever.
Why were you still hanging on to that image of that soldier in that
sure.
movie? Or you undoubtedly had learned a lot more about what a psychiatrist does in the intervening
Well,
years.
when I went to my residency in the first half a year I was there, I was going to leave because I said it's not what I thought it was going to be. They were doing a lot of Freudian type
Okay.
psychoanalytic approach, and I'm a common sense guy, so it wasn't fitting with me. As a matter of fact, my wife convinced me to stay on. The director of education at Warren was a Japanese American from California, bright, wonderful person, Dr. Hoshino, and his feet was on the ground. He practiced good psychiatry. He and I became good friends because I wanted to learn and he wanted to teach.
Okay.
So that we'd have projects up there to do, and I'd volunteer for every project. So we had to go to classes, but I would volunteer for every project. So after about the 7th project I volunteered for, he says, you know, Burrios, you're volunteering for everything. He says, do you have the confidence you could do this? I said, well, I don't know if I can do it until I take it on. I said, but the one thing you don't know about me is when I take on a project, I'm going to give it my best effort. I said, the other thing you don't know about me is when I take on and I do the best effort, if I fail, if I can't complete the project, I said, I didn't fail, I just can't do that. So I'm not afraid to try anything.
Okay, so you stay in psychiatry
Yes.
school. How long does it take you to get your
3 years.
3 full years?
Yes.
What year do you graduate with your degree in psychiatry?
1969.
You go right into practice?
Yes.
Where?
In Old Fort, in Scranton.
You come into Scranton.
My first office was the Glen Alden building that's now Jefferson Hall for the University of Scranton. I was on the 4th floor.
Was there an appreciation for what a psychiatrist does in those days?
Well, it was difficult. When I came into town, unfortunately, there was one psychiatrist in town, Dr. Konopka, and he had a heart attack 1 month before I came into town. So when I started practice, he sent me his entire practice. So I never had to start a practice. I was booked day one.
Meant to be.
And I was, at that time, there were no mental health centers. The only other psychiatrists in town were at Clark Summit State Hospital or the VA hospital here in Wilkes-Barre. So I was the only private psychiatrist from Binghamton, New York to Allentown. Busier than hell.
Okay. So what year do you set up your practice?
1969.
1969. How old are you? In 69?
In 69, I'm 36.
36. Almost 50 years later. You're 80 years old, or today 79 and a half.
Yes.
We're counting months now. You're still practicing. You said to me when you walked in today, you still do 14-hour days.
Yes.
And that when you're 100, you'll go part-time and go down to 8 hours a day.
That's correct. That's my plan. That's my plan.
So you love going to work every day.
That's my joy of my life.
Did you ever take a hiatus at all? Did you ever take time? Do you vacation? Do you?
No, as a matter of fact, last year I took no vacation.
You could have.
Oh, as a matter of fact, I lost some time because I sold my practice, so I'm working for people now, and they permit you to take 2 times your vacation load for a year. And I found out the last 3 days, before I took a 1-week vacation last year, I found that the last 3 days I paid myself because I was over my limit. At one time, I used to work part-time at Clark Summit State Hospital. I worked there half-time for 14 years. When I left there, because I was over the age, I think I had taken something like 2 sick days.
Okay. I wish we had several hours. This is great stuff, and we're getting near the end of the time. You were nominated for this by your son, Mark. He must be so proud of his father to recommend you for this interview.
Sure. I'm sure he is.
Tell us about Mark.
Well, I have 2 children. I have Tammy and Mark. And my wife and I were not gifted to have our own children. They're both adopted. I got Tammy when I was in my residency because she was in an orphanage and we had no children, and so we took her as a foster child. But after having her for 2 years, her family never visited, so I knew I wasn't going to stay in Western Pennsylvania, so I told them, I said, I contact the agency, says, either have the family start taking her out.
Move a little faster.
Or get me in here.
And Mark.
And then when I got home, I said, I want a boy someday. So one of the doctors had delivered a baby one day at CMC, And the pediatrician did the examination and thought the boy was wonderful. So he told me, he called me, he said, I understand you wanted a boy. He says, I just examined that boy last night. He says, if you want to go up and see him at CMC, he says, there is a thing called individual adoption. He said, if you get an attorney. So I went up to see Mark. I loved him. And I went home to my wife and I says, you got to meet me at noon. We're going to adopt a child.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
Dr. Barrett, your story is so inspiring. I had no idea. There's so many lessons in your life, but I'm sure my audience, you being a psychiatrist, would want me to ask this question. How do you make a difference in people's lives and have the needs, the psychiatric guidance needs of people changed over the years of your practice? Is our society changing in such a way that you're helping people in different ways today than you did 50 years ago?
Well, I'm old. The first psychiatric medicine came out in 1952. I was a sophomore in college at that time, so I watched all the medicines come by. Till this day, I go to Harvard graduate school every 2 years to make sure I'm up to date with my medications. As a matter of fact, I'll be going on September, the end of September for a 4-day course. Every 2 years, I continue to get educated on the medications,
Sure.
so that I'm up to date with my medicines. So the medicines are much better, you know. People, and when I first started practice, 70% of the people who were in my office were worried about who they were going to meet in the office. Now, more than 70% are referred to me by patients. You know, I saw Dr. Barrett, he helped me. And then I tell people my high, all-time high, is watching a patient who is very ill, and they come in smiling and laughing, and their family's happy. There are no drugs out there.
There are no drugs.
There are no drugs that can make me feel that high.
I would make you feel that
I'm
high. How do drugs help people who approach you? What role do drugs play?
Well, the roles play a big role because it started with my wife. My wife had a problem with what's called agitated depression. She also had obsessive compulsive features which made her worry about her weight, so she would not take the old antidepressants. They could cause weight gain. In 1986, Prozac came on the market and they advertised it can cause weight loss, and she jumped on it. And when she did, 4 lives changed. Her life, my life, and the 2 kids. I mean, it didn't make her better, it changed her. She became this wonderful woman that I have today, speaks to everyone, has a photographic memory, she knows everyone by name.
Oh my goodness.
She talks to everyone. If I go out to dinner with her, I have to tell her 30 minutes before I want to leave because she's going to talk to everybody in the place before we go out. You know? So the drugs work.
Can you share with us a life you changed besides your wife, obviously with no specificity, that represents for you something you're most proud of?
Yes. I'm not going to use any names.
Of course not.
But I'm talking about an incident where years ago, an attorney asked me to see a client of his who had confessed to murdering his brother and setting the house on fire. And we were trying to find out why he did it so we could plea bargain him. And when I visited him, I realized something was wrong with the confession. It just didn't fit. And I go back and tell him that. So then I went back and finally realized this gentleman had a problem that's called obsessive compulsive disorder with violent thoughts. So he thought he murdered his brother, and then he convinced himself he did it, and he confessed 3 times. And so at that point, no one's aware. And the attorney even said to me, he says, if he didn't do it, who did it? I said, I don't know who did it, but I know 2 people in this world that know he didn't. Me and the guy who did the murder. And so I fought for his going to trial because the DA at that time promised him 5 years if he confessed to 3rd-degree murder, and I kept saying, you can't do it. He's innocent. He has 3 small children. I says, and he has an elderly father. I said, you can't do it. We're going to go to trial. So I pushed for the trial. We got the trial, and he was found not guilty. And he's still doing his business today, and everything's going fine. And I said, if I didn't do anything else in my life except that.
What are the lessons of your life for the young people watching?
Never quit. Never
Very
quit.
simple for you, isn't
Never
it?
quit. Never quit. Yep. At one point, I had a very nice house in Waverly with a big swimming pool and a bathhouse, and I'd go home at night and watch the moon over the sky, and I'd say, so every night I'd say, you know, where else but in America could this kid from Old Forge, whose parents came from Italy, have this?
Never quit. Well, that'll be the lesson of this interview.
Yes. I still recall Jimmy Valvano from North Carolina who died of cancer when he gave his last speech, and he says, never give up, never ever give up.
Dr. Boriosi, thank you for a
Thank you
fascinating
so much for
conversation.
to be here today. Thank you.
Every season of the Business Journal, an interviewee surprises us. when the guest almost takes it over. Helen Lavelle of Lavelle Strategy Group in Scranton did that, with stories of her youth, education, marriage, business setbacks, and her raw determination to succeed. Meet Helen Lavelle next week.